Today is Friday, September 8th. We'll tell you about the latest track of Hurricane Lee that's now the strongest storm of this hurricane season. Also, foundations representing nearly every American president from the last century did something they've never done before, why they're coming together to call for change. Plus, a rescue mission underway to save an American trapped in a cave, Apple's urgent security update for all iPhones and iPads, and how a stray dog picked his own new home full of people who especially needed his love. Those stories and much more news to know in today's episode. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. Hurricane Lee has become the first Category 5 storm of the Atlantic hurricane season. That's the highest category there is, and it means the hurricane is packing winds of at least 160 miles an hour. The National Hurricane Center says many forecasting tools are calling for it to keep getting stronger at rates not normally seen with model forecasts. For now, it's still way out in the Atlantic Ocean. And at this point, it's too early to say for sure whether Lee might make landfall anywhere or if it will just keep spinning far away from land. But meteorologists say even if it doesn't make landfall, it could start bringing potentially dangerous surf and rip currents to the U.S. East Coast as soon as this Sunday. FEMA is already preparing in places like Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands just in case the storm shifts over the weekend. And it's keeping a close eye on the forecast to see what's in store for the East Coast next week. For the first time in history, foundations representing nearly every former president, from Herbert Hoover to Barack Obama, came together on one single issue. They released their first joint statement to warn that democracy is fragile and needs to be protected. The effort was organized by the George W. Bush Presidential Center, and it got a dozen other foundations and centers from both Democratic and Republican presidents to sign. They were apparently prompted by concern for American democracy in the face of deep polarization around the U.S. So in their public declaration, they're calling for Americans to recommit to the country's key principles like compassion, tolerance, and respect for diverse beliefs. It also urged Americans to respect democratic institutions and uphold secure, accessible elections. To be clear, the statement did not call out any specific leader or politician or really give any specific examples, but it did include a message for elected officials, saying they must, quote, lead by example and govern effectively, because that will help restore trust in public service. The Pew Research Center has found trust in the government is near a historic low. A poll it released last year showed only 20% of Americans said they trusted the government. But this statement made it clear the country is not past the point of no return, and there's at least a chance of civil discourse returning to politics. One of former President Trump's key advisors was just convicted of a crime for refusing to cooperate with lawmakers investigating the Capitol riot. Peter Navarro served as a trade advisor to former President Trump for years, but when a House committee summoned him to testify and hand over documents about January 6th, he ignored that subpoena. Navarro argued he was protected by executive privilege, which is the idea that the president can have secret conversations in certain circumstances, though a judge ruled there was not enough evidence to show it applied in this case. Navarro is actually the second former Trump aide to face contempt of Congress charges. Remember, the first was former White House advisor Steve Bannon, who was sentenced to 4 months in prison for 2 misdemeanor counts, though he is still free as he appeals that verdict. Navarro is also promising to appeal. A well-known actor who starred in That 70s Show was sentenced this week. He's now facing 30 years to life in prison. Danny Masterson was already found guilty of raping 2 women at the height of his fame 2 decades ago. And at his sentencing hearing yesterday, both women spoke to the court and directly to Masterson. Both women say instead of police, they reported him to officials at the Church of Scientology, where they and Masterson were members. They say they were told not to officially report that crime because Masterson was such a high-ranking member of the church. And then they were put through an ethics program. The church says that's not true. And at trial, Masterson's lawyers said their client only had consensual relations with the women. But he didn't testify in court, and his lawyers did not call any witnesses to the stand. And eventually, he was convicted. Masterson will be eligible for parole after serving 25 and a half years in prison, but he can also be held in prison for life. Well, some of the most prominent world leaders are getting together today for the yearly Group of 20 summit to coordinate policy for the global economy. And this year, the agenda includes climate change, inflation brought on by Russia's war in Ukraine, economic development in low-income countries, and more. If members reach a consensus on any of those subjects, they'll issue an official joint declaration. But in the past, even when the group has made ambitious pledges, they haven't faced any real consequences for not following through. Now, that said, there have been plenty of times when they did follow through anyway. And G20 supporters say it's always good to get the world's most powerful people in a room together. Though this year, there will be a couple of no-shows. The heads of Russia and China will not be there. So President Biden is reportedly using the opportunity to show that the U.S. and allies are better economic and security partners than Russia or China anyway. And he's apparently expected to announce a few agreements that have already been reached. Stay tuned. We have more news coming up. But first, I want to let you know about our sponsor, Trust and Will. As you may know, part of the reason I started this podcast was to help people feel informed, but not overwhelmed, and to feel prepared, but not scared or anxious. And I have that same idea in mind when I think about how to secure my family's future. I don't need to fear the future, but I do want to feel prepared. And with Trust and Will, I appreciate that we were able to create an estate plan to ensure our family is prepared and protected without having to spend a lot of time or money. Trust and Will has simplified the process of creating and managing a will or trust online, from finding out what's right for your family to finalizing documents with a notary. My husband and I recently crafted our will, and were pleasantly surprised at how simple it was, how quickly we were able to complete it, and that it guided us through things we may not have thought about on our own. And yet, plans start at just $159. So gain peace of mind today with Trust and Will. Get 10% off plus free shipping of your estate plan documents by visiting trustandwill.com/newsworthy. That's 10% off and free shipping at trustandwill.com/newsworthy. Rescuers in Turkey are now racing to save an American explorer who's been stranded in a cave for days. And officials say it's one of the largest and most complex cave rescues ever in the world. Mark Dickey is actually an experienced caver, instructor, and rescuer himself who was on an expedition to map new passages in the cave. But last week, he developed severe, life-threatening gastrointestinal bleeding while he was inside one of Turkey's deepest cave systems. A team of Hungarian cave rescuers and a doctor were able to get down to Dickey, and they were able to give him medical care. His condition has improved now, but he still might need a stretcher to get out. The only way for anyone to get out, though, is to have elite-level physical ability and rope skills. The cave is mostly vertical, but also has turns and tight squeezes. Some of the passages are filled with water, and there's a risk of falling rocks. In ideal conditions, the trip takes about 15 hours. Yesterday, rescuers from Turkey, Bulgaria, Italy, and Croatia arrived. So at least 170 rescuers are now part of this mission. But it could still be another week before Dickey makes it to the surface. Dickey was able to send up a video of himself where he thanked rescuers for saving his life. He also says rescue operations like this show the world how the international community can work well together. If you have an iPhone or an iPad, Apple says, update it now. The tech giant issued an emergency warning along with updates yesterday saying they're rolling out to fix some security vulnerabilities. It says cybercriminals may already be exploiting them to hack devices, steal data, and more. And one of the issues is apparently in the Wallet app, so this is an especially important update. Oh, and here's another heads up. The next Apple update that includes new features is just days away from being released, so you might be updating your devices again soon. A stadium packed with tennis fans was left waiting for nearly 50 minutes last night ahead of a U.S. Open semifinal. The issue was 4 protesters in the upper levels of the stadium were shouting about environmental issues. One man had even glued his bare feet to the cement floor. So security personnel, NYPD officers, and medical professionals came in to remove him. When they eventually did, the crowd cheered. The group Extinction Rebellion took credit for the protests, using the slogan, "No tennis on a dead planet," to call for an end to fossil fuels. But for now, we want to update you about the actual tennis match that was able to get going again after the delay. 19-year-old American tennis star Coco Gauff won it, meaning she'll be in the championship final tomorrow. She is the youngest American to reach the U.S. Open final since the legendary Serena Williams did it back in 1999 at just 17 years old. She'll face Aryna Sabalenka of Belarus. By the way, on the men's side, some of the biggest names in the sport are competing in the semifinals today. Then the final men's match is happening on Sunday. It is now officially football season, and already there's been an upset. Last night's NFL season opener was in Kansas City with last year's Super Bowl winner, the Kansas City Chiefs, against the Detroit Lions. And the Lions won it 21-20. Another highly anticipated game happens on Monday when quarterback Aaron Rodgers has his first regular season game with his new team, the New York Jets. They're facing the Buffalo Bills. Other Week 1 games to watch include the Miami Dolphins versus the LA Chargers, the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Cleveland Browns, and the Dallas Cowboys versus the New York Giants. All 3 of those games will happen this Sunday. By the way, if you have a grandparent who likes football, you might want to watch with them this weekend. Grandparents' Day is also this Sunday. That's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Feel Good Friday, when we bring you one extra feel-good or positive news story before the weekend. But first, a quick break for our sponsor, Nutrafol. Did you know that hair thinning will happen to about 1 in 2 women? Yeah, around 50% of women. Thankfully, Nutrafol helps women address it from within with science-backed supplements. Nutrafol targets root causes of thinning, which can range from stress and hormones to environment and nutrition to metabolism and more. Well, in a clinical study, 86% of women reported improved hair growth after taking Nutrafol Women's Hair Growth Supplement for 6 months. I actually started Nutrafol postpartum when I noticed changes in my hair after giving birth, and I was so thrilled to find a solution that I felt comfortable taking in that first year postpartum and that actually worked for me. And I've now switched to Nutrafol Women just to continue to support my hair health. So take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering the Newsworthy listeners $10 off your first month's subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code Newsworthy. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code Newsworthy. That's Nutrafol.com with the promo code Newsworthy. Okay, now back to Feel Good Friday. We're talking about a stray dog who kept escaping an animal shelter in the middle of the night to sleep in the lobby of a nursing home nearby. And it wasn't easy. He had to climb over 2 fences and cross a highway to get there. Still, he did all of that 3 times. So after the 3rd time, the nursing home staff checked to make sure all the residents were okay with him sticking around. And then they collectively decided to adopt him and name him Scout. Now they say for each person who lives there, Scout is their dog. He apparently enjoys going from room to room for treats and hugs. And the staff says he can also sense when people need comforting, like when they're sick or sad. He's even been with some residents during their final hours. The nursing home has been so grateful for him that they started raising money and gathering supplies for the animal shelter who originally got Scout off the streets. The nurses put his photo on social media, and with that, donations came in from around the world. All right, we'll be back tomorrow with our special edition Saturday episode. We are talking about the summer of strikes, why there's been an increase in workers walking off the job, and all about the next big strike that could start in a matter of days. So be sure to tune in this weekend. Then, of course, we'll be back on Monday with your next news roundup. For now, thank you so much for listening and have a great weekend.